guys, welcome back. Welcome to part 2. If you've not seen part 1 already, I'd go back and watch that. That sort of outlines the history of the Quayside, everything that's really gone on before now, every sort of regeneration attempt up to sort of the 1998 Sir Terry Farrell masterplan. So this one we're going to talk about the Tyne Development Corporation, sort of the work they did on the city and just how this all links back together. The stagnation in the Quayside was evident as this was included in the boundary of the newly created Tyne Development Corporation. The North East councils were Labour controlled and they objected against the Conservative government in Whitehall having these sort of quangos which were led by unelected businessmen, and they also objected to the loss of planning control in these areas because what happens is when development corporations are formed, they take over the planning rights, the planning control, development management for that area. So it means they're sort of giving away any say, any control over a part of the city that's actually within their boundary. So as I said, this sets up a difficult relationship between the city council and the development corporation. Due to the lack of democracy for this, there's no real planning, like the regular planning system. I don't know if they work with objections. I don't know if you could object to any of the development corporations' proposals or anything, but obviously it takes away a lack of democracy and takes away the control from the council. The first thing the development corporation did once it took control of the Quayside area was a vision exercise. This was commissioned by national government. This highlighted the barriers to development of the Quayside. This identified traffic issues, a lack of parking, conflict between conservation of the sort of heritage areas of the Quayside and development, and land assembly problems. I think there was a lot of different sites all owned by different people. One of the main recommendations for the development corporation from this sort of vision exercise was that the development corporation should limit its efforts throughout the area in order to instead focus on a small number of flagship projects, as they wanted development corporation to create pockets of real success and rather than try and spread the resources too thin, and this would lead to a sort of reduce the overall effect and the overall benefit of the development corporation. They highlighted the East Quayside areas having the most obvious development potential. The first proposal by the development corporation was a 250 bedroom 4-star hotel with casino and multiplex cinema. This had limited specialist stroke themed retail and 750 car parking spaces. Executive housing would have 100 units, and Quayside environmental improvements would also be part of the scheme, as well as an ambiguous wording of upgrading of the Usburn. This is interesting compared to sort of the complete Quayside, as throughout this there's no mention of office development. In the later revisions of the Quayside sort of master plans, office development becomes a considerable part of this. Office becomes sort of the main sort of use of the area. So it's quite interesting how they didn't include that. Another interesting aspect of this is the low number of units housing. The site had over 20 acres of space and only 100 units of executive housing. I think with this you could see, as with the previous development, the sort of low density 2 to 3 stories. I think you'll probably see more of this throughout the site rather than what later came to be of high-rise blocks on the Quayside and more like 7-8 stories. Another interesting, this could be due to the market at the time. Obviously we've seen the struggles of the Quayside market, the Quayside residential market, so it could be due to this. Back to sort of the overall sort of disagreement between the City Council and Development Corporation. Another thing could be that the City Council didn't actually want any office space down the Quayside. They were trying to preserve the city centre, Grangetown, as being the main sort of office area for the city. They were trying to encourage office development here where there's good transport links. The consultant's view of central Quayside was to benefit selective projects, but no flagship project would be located here. They believed the main stimulus would be from the East Quayside scheme, and the consultants highlighted that around 2,300 new parking spaces would be required for a regenerated Quayside, a number that would not be promoted in a sustainable edge of city centre location these days. I think one of the main things about this whole Quayside development is quite evident there's a large amount of parking, even with the completed scheme. The Development Corporation focused its efforts mainly on the vacant East Quayside site and did not assist with the central conservation area of the Quayside. This was home to most of the listed buildings, and this was in the area, was under the control of the Development Corporation, no longer the City Council. However, they left this area to work with its own market. They didn't really build any significant projects here. A design competition was held for the prospective developers interested in these Quayside, with a public consultation exercise carried out also. The appointed developer in 1988 was Shearwater, a company that mainly carried out schemes in London and the South, which is a notably different market to the north of England. The main scheme promoted by Shearwater was of festival shopping. The core ideology behind this new scheme was festival shopping. This aimed at bringing life to the area by attracting visitors, as well as using this to support the adjacent offices and residential buildings. Festival shopping can be described as shopping with outlets for food and drink, while one enjoys leisure time with family and friends. Winning a public competition in order to become the appointed developer is often a necessary step to being the developer on any large sort of public scheme, often done by development corporations. However, due to the nature of these, developers are trying to sort of promote something that often can't be built out the way it's promoted. Obviously, they're trying to win the competition, so they're going to go for the fanciest idea possible, and what the market can actually support is actually a lot different to this. One of the notable features of this scheme is the replica of the Co-op warehouse. This is now Malmaison, and a large festival shopping element which juts out into the river. The decision to choose developer Rosehall / Shearwater was probably also influenced by the fact the land of East Quayside had been brought up by a developer called Stanley Miller. It was a local builder and developer who had speculatively brought the site in the early 1970s, but they'd failed to ever bring a solution to the site. So Shearwater was working with these, and this could have been a solution. Obviously, if someone already owns most of the site, it would have made the development of the site a lot easier. The proposed scheme, however, did not set up future Quayside proposals and noted a shift away from the overall conservation ideas of previous generation. The new proposals would feature more retail provision, major office content, and a totally modern scheme on a totally cleared site, apart from the Co-op warehouse, the one listed building on the site. The City Council obviously didn't like this idea. It was contrary to their adopted local plan. Office was proposed outside of the designated office areas mentioned earlier. They only wanted office development within the central area of Newcastle than within the city centre. Obviously the Quayside wasn't considered the city centre at this point. The festival shopping would also compete with the Quayside Sunday Market, which operates down in the area, and P&G, a major company employer, occupied part of the East Quayside site and would have to be moved away, and they objected to this overall proposal of having to move away from the Quayside. Another hurdle facing Development Corporation was that speculative buyers had brought up large parts of the site, as mentioned earlier. This was obviously before the Development Corporation was founded, and now the Development Corporation had to solve this. A compulsory purchase order was required by the Development Corporation. One part of the site could not be developed without the adjacent sites, as the overall scheme needed to sort of stretch the whole length of it, especially with the high cost of associated infrastructure on the site. This included a new quay wall and other major infrastructure and utilities beneath the surface. The profitable part of the site would be developed for retail use, which would support the adjacent unprofitable parts. They highlighted the unprofitable parts as being further away from the city centre and more towards the Quayside. Looking chronologically at the Quayside, the next development that came was the former fish market building being converted into offices. This was done at a considerable cost, and this was then later changed 2 years later into a nightclub and music venue. This was due to the growing music and nightclub scene on the Quayside, with clubs like Beige Beach Club all opening down here. This is still open to this day and still a popular music venue. You can still go and listen to live bands perform in the fish market. The Copthorne Hotel, located the other side of the high level bridge to the fish market, was next completed. This was completed in 1992. This was designed by Arup Associates and received grants of $5 million in order to make the scheme work. This was to make the scheme overall viable. This, along with it, created a new quayside promenade in front of the Copthorne Hotel that led underneath the swing bridge. This helped with the overall creation of a continuous pedestrian path along the quayside. This would be sort of one of the core principles the quayside development would have. In 1992, AMEC, a large construction company which also handled property development, was appointed to develop the area. This, alongside a more market-orientated scheme, emerged based on a master plan by Sir Terry Farrell. Sir Terry Farrell is an international architect who had previously studied at Newcastle University and therefore had strong ties to the North East. He designed buildings across the world and in London as well, so that I don't think he has any other work within Newcastle, maybe something at the university, but I don't think anything. The proposal incorporated lots of car parking, providing a scheme of in-town office centre, but built out to out-of-town parking standards. This allowed the proposal to be seen as similar to the successful Newcastle Business Park, also developed by the Tyne Development Corporation. This new master plan had the support of the Newcastle City Council design team, but there was reservations by the Newcastle City Council policy team, obviously due to the office provision outside of the set area. This was obviously due to the low density of the scheme and high levels of parking. But obviously the reservations of the City Council didn't actually matter, as they had no development control in this area. In order to make this overall scheme work, the Development Corporation would have to build the car parks and gift these to the developer. They were also gifting the site in order to make the developer could make a profit. This shows sort of the considerable investment the Development Corporation had to make in order for the scheme to be sort of viable for any developer. So the private market probably had no chance of ever actually developing this and getting the associated infrastructure down. Obviously, AMEC, the developer, would have never started the scheme unless a profit was more or less assured. A large investment was also made on the infrastructure of the site. This was much beyond the original budgets, with a standard of public realm much higher than anything that had actually been seen in the northeast at the time, with lots of public art incorporated within the design. The Farrell scheme also reflected the realities of the commercial property market. Each building could be built, let and sold individually. Each of these would have a relatively small amount of cost, between £5 and £10 million. A large mixed-use scheme for the site, as originally proposed under the festival shopping, would have been a difficult development and would have been too big of a development for one financial institution to purchase. Developments on a new site in a new market are risky, and large, complicated mixed use, as originally proposed, would have been difficult to actually complete. The Farrell scheme gave the market a chance to work and reflected on the financial necessities of regeneration. Development Corporation was worried about the slow progress of the scheme and that the regeneration efforts might not work. By 1995, two of the largest law firms in the northeast, Ward Hadaway and Dickinson Dees, were relocated to East Quayside. This is obviously a major moment of establishment for the scheme. The corporation used different architects to design the different quayside buildings, but have to follow the original guidelines of Sir Terry Farrell's master plan. The Development Corporation came under heavy criticism, as was limited demand at the time for office space. But what demand there was being attracted to their schemes. There was concern regarding displacement of the city centre's offices all moving down towards the quayside, leaving other areas void. By subsidising the market to attract tenants for the quayside, they were killing the outside market. This was a major thing with this sort of overall regeneration. It actually took a lot of the offices out of Grangetown, out of the city centre, and led to further problems down the line. So there was a further project done to preserve Grangetown that I hope to talk about later. Another success of this story was obviously the Malmaison Hotel. As mentioned earlier, it's one of the retained listed buildings on the site, the former Co-op warehouse. This was the only listed building on the East Quayside, as it was a reinforced concrete construction originating from France, and one of the few examples of this in the UK. The new pavilion in front of this was occupied by Picture and Piano Chain and also helped bring people to the site. These both became occupied in 1997. By 1998, the Development Corporation was coming to the end of its 10-year scheduled life, as development corporations are given sort of a limited lifespan to work. The following Labour government abolished such bodies and returned the planning and planning control powers to the local authority. A notable issue of contention between the City Council and the Development Corporation was that of the Newcastle Arena, which the City Council did not believe was up to the overall design specification. Less than 20 years on from this contention, Newcastle Arena is set to be replaced by a brand new arena on the Gateshead Quayside due to sort of the lack of size and the sort of the failing of the current arena. The success of the Development Corporation is a topic within itself. I hope to conclude on this in sort of a roundup at the end once we've discussed Gateshead's side of the Quayside as well. That the funding of development corporations, and one of the main arguments was that the funding given to development corporations could have been better handled by giving this money to actually let a local authority work. As discussed in the first part, the local authority never thought they had the funds to regenerate the Quayside, and it wasn't until this development corporation with a lot of money was able to. The public costs of creating the East Quayside was actually extremely high, with £80 million of public infrastructure paid for. This shows the high public cost of the scheme. The moving of the firms down to the Quayside had its own effect, as I mentioned earlier, of creating the void within Grangertown. The city centre of Newcastle had much more regional importance than sort of the importance of creating a new Quayside. As I said, this would lead to the Grangertown conservation project to sort of bring people back into Grangertown. But I think, as we can see now, looking in 2020, that Grangertown has developed a lot more from office space into now a place for leisure, a lot more eateries, a lot more bars, and the office provision is down towards the Quayside. So I think you can see it did work out in the end, and if the office space never moved, where would the leisure users be? It's obviously, you can always never really predict these things, but it's an interesting thing to look at. But I think you can see with the overall development of the Quayside, what was created was a really high quality public realm, space for people to use. There's some issues with no actual designated cycle paths, there's clashes with pedestrians and cyclists, but the whole overall area is very pleasant. I think it's one of the best waterfronts in the UK due to its consistent design for the whole East Quayside, and that links in quite nicely with the conservation areas of Central Quayside and a lot of the other developments. So I think you can really see there was a lot of good work done here. So join us in part 3 when we talk about the Gateshead side of the Quayside. But thanks for watching.